Hey everybody, Billie Eilish's new 3D concert film, Hit Me Hard and Soft, is one of the most immersive concert experiences I have ever seen. Yet what stayed with me afterward was not simply the technology or even the music. It was that strange tension between closeness and distance that runs through the entire film. Co-directed by Billie Eilish and James Cameron, the movie constantly pushes Billie physically closer to the audience than almost any concert film I've experienced before. At times, it genuinely feels as though she has stepped out of the stage and into the theater with you. The spatial depth of the 3D cinematography, it's remarkable, particularly during the large performance sequences where the lighting and the smoke and the platforms and the lasers and crowd all kind of create this illusion of a shared physical space rather than a performance being projected onto a cinema screen. Still, despite all that closeness, the film repeatedly stops short of allowing the audience to fully connect with Billie herself. What I mean by that is that the closer the movie physically brings us to her, the harder it becomes to take her in and know her. At first, I thought this was simply an editing problem, but over time I realized that the tension may actually be the point of the whole thing because Billie Eilish's entire artistic identity seems built around creating this intimacy for her audience while still carefully controlling how much intimacy follows back toward her from them. And that contradiction ultimately became the emotional core of this experience for me. And it made this film far more interesting than I expected it to be, given this was my first real experience with Billie Eilish. So let's break down what's going on with this film. And please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoy these kind of deep dive discussions about film and performance and story. So, after the success of Taylor Swift's theatrical concert film, it really became obvious that the industry had discovered this new form of profitable entertainment. Audiences were willing to treat concert as cinematic events, and theaters, they suddenly became an extension of the live performance venue that made concerts accessible to audiences around the world for a fraction of the price. Since then, concert films have appeared pretty much everywhere, but most of them still felt like these traditional concerts projected on a giant screen in a theater. Hit Me Hard and Soft evolves the cinematic language of that format and it turns it into something that is bigger than Billie Eilish herself because this movie feels more like an experiment in experimental entertainment where the goal is not just to watch Billie Eilish perform, but to feel physically present inside the performance with her. That ambition connects directly to James Cameron's career long fascination with immersive cinema and storytelling. With films like Avatar, Cameron used 3D technology to pull audiences into fantastical worlds. Here, the goal is different because the film is not asking us to explore a fictional environment. It's asking us to emotionally connect with a real human being. And I think that distinction is what matters. Fantasy, spectacle, and human intimacy do not operate according to the same cinematic rules. And in many ways, Hit Me Hard and Soft feels like a film discovering that difference in real time. It's like watching cinematic research happen on screen, and we're part of it. We are all part of that grand experience. One of the things that surprised me most about this film is how much it reveals about Billie Eilish as a performer rather than simply as a singer. Watching her on stage, you begin to realize she is conducting the emotional energy within the audience almost as much as she is performing her music. She understands how to direct her fans' excitement within an arena through pacing and movement and silence and lighting and physical proximity to them. Everything about her concert design reflects that strategic philosophy of closeness and distance. The stage itself sits low and is centered within the arena so that the audience surrounds her on all sides instead of separating herself from the crowd. Billie constantly moves around that stage, reaching out, touching hands, hugging fans, brushing past people, and just connecting with them physically whenever she can. Even the way she dresses removes some of those traditional barriers between assigned roles and celebrity and audiences because her performances are far more focused on comfort and vulnerability than polished glamour. The same artistic philosophy exists in her music as well. One of the most fascinating aspects of her singing style is that she often undersings rather than aggressively kind of projecting outward toward the audience. There are moments, sure, where she clearly has the vocal power to belt out a phrase or a song, yet she intentionally softens that delivery. She blurs the words together slightly, or she lets the phrases trail into a rougher and more intimate texture. During the song Bad Guy, which ended up being the song that I enjoyed the most in this film, I became increasingly aware that her vocal style forces the audience to lean in, to listen to her, to attentively absorb what she is expressing. So rather than pushing her performance outward, she actually pulls the audience inward toward her. And that artistic choice mirrors almost everything that happens in this movie. What makes Hit Me Hard and Soft so contradictory and fascinating is that Billy's entire artistic identity appears built around removing borders between the performer and the audience. But the film itself, it repeatedly introduces these new forms of distance that you wouldn't necessarily think about in advance. The immersive technology removes those physical barriers, which is no surprise with James Cameron behind the lens. The 3D cinematography brings Billy astonishingly close to the audience, sometimes so close that it feels like you could reach out and touch the stage. The problem is that the filmmaking techniques often interrupt those moments of intimacy. The editing is simply too fast for that kind of immersive experience the film is attempting to create. So while it works beautifully at bringing Billy into our space, it doesn't let us linger on her to make a satisfying connection of just looking at her for an extended moment. In a traditional music video, rapid cutting like this creates excitement and rhythm, and that blends with the audio and the video, and it pulls it together into this single heightened experience. In immersive cinema, the audience experiences images differently because your eyes are no longer passively watching a flat screen. They're actively exploring space and depth and movement and facial expressions and visual textures all at once. And that process, it requires time for our eyes to fully focus, for us to have just an extra moment to internalize what we are seeing. We need to just linger on it just for a moment longer than we get in many parts of this film. Again and again, the film gets close to Billy emotionally and visually, only to cut away before the moment can fully settle into an experience for us. This became obvious during the song Bad Guy. This is where it really stood out for me. The staging, the lighting, the movement, and the audience energy all suddenly clicked together in a genuinely exciting way. But it also became the sequence where the emotional distance felt strongest because that's when you wanted it the most. But Billy's hair partially obscures her face. The lasers splash across the screen and the frame, and the editing becomes increasingly aggressive. Just as your eyes start to focus on her image, the film cuts and it moves somewhere else. Or she looks away, or something like that happens. And just as we start to click, it's gone. It creates this really fascinating contradiction where the technology, it's trying to eliminate distance while the filmmaking and directorial choices keep reintroducing it. Strangely, I don't think this is accidental. It is so prominent throughout the film that it is clearly an artistic choice. And I think that has to be taken into account here. The documentary sections are where the film takes some time to breathe and to unpack the hours immediately before and after Billy's live show at the Co op Live Arena in Manchester, England. It's in these quieter backstage moments where the film is most compelling because they reveal the emotional and physical toll for the tour on her as a performer. Billy talks openly about injuries and shin splints and exhaustion and the pressure of continuing to perform through extreme pain because she understands what the experience means for fans who spent months saving money and waiting for this moment. It's really these kinds of intimate scenes that humanize the scale of this production. However, one of Billy's most revealing moments is when she talks about how much she loves just rolling down the SUV window while driving between venues because it's one of the few times when she can breathe fresh air during long stretches of touring. Most of her life becomes this cycle between hotel rooms and backstage spaces and vehicles and arenas. The conversation fragments leave us with a sense of constantly being surrounded by enormous audiences while still feeling separated from ordinary human experiences. That emotional separation is echoed throughout this film, even during those backstage interviews with James Cameron, when the camera repeatedly settles on her face just long enough for the audience to feel this deeper connection start to form before it abruptly cuts away. Then there are other moments when she'll look directly into the lens briefly before looking away. During those moments, that suggest vulnerability before retreating from it. This is how the film constantly teases emotional intimacy without ever fully surrendering to it and pulling down that wall. Ironically, the moment where Billy felt the most emotionally exposed was during Ocean Eyes when the entire stadium went silent for just a few minutes for her to create this live vocal loop. Suddenly, the spectacle of the show disappeared, and everyone's attention was focused on this woman sitting alone on stage with a spotlight and 1,000 eyes focused just on her. For a moment, there's nowhere for her to hide, and it feels like every part of her is on display as her voice echoes through the arena. And for once, the film finally allows us to simply stay with her, even if we can't quite focus on her. As a concert experience, Hit Me Hard and Soft is visually impressive, technologically ambitious, and often mesmerizing. However, as a film, it's much more complicated due to the more vulnerable documentary moments off stage. But the question remains, is this a ticket or skip it experience for you? So, despite how evasive Billy feels in this film, the answer to that question is pretty straightforward. It's a yes for fans. If you're a fan of Billie Eilish, I think you're going to enjoy this film. It's also a ticket worthy film for people who are interested in cinematic experiences or learning more about Billie Eilish herself, if you're just curious. However, if you have problems with flashing lights, depth perception, loud noises, or hey, you're just not a Billie Eilish fan, and that's fine, this is not a film for you and you probably will want to skip it. The movie succeeds at removing the physical borders between the performer and the audience, but it also reveals that immersive concert experiences require a different way of filming and editing to enable emotional intimacy, especially with a live action event like this. 3D immersion can only bring Billie Eilish so far into the theater before traditional concert filmmaking techniques begin interrupting the connection that technology is trying to create for us. And honestly, I think that the tension is what makes this film worth discussing, whether you are a Billie Eilish fan or not, because Hit Me Hard and Soft will directly impact the future of immersive entertainment. I have no doubt of that. I don't think James Cameron would have signed on to co-direct this film if he didn't see it as a step forward in cinema history. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. Please do give this review a thumbs up and subscribe if it helped. I'd also love to know what you think about this film and the idea of immersive movie experiences like this. And while you're here, hey, why not check out one of these other reviews and let me know what you think? All right, everybody. I will see you all again soon. Until then, bye for now and happy viewing.